Hello everyone, welcome to Cashcroft TV. My name is Kalen Ashcroft. Thank you very much for watching and or listening to this episode of Ages of Empires, where we will be going through all the major world empires throughout history. In this episode, we will be covering the Kingdom of Aksum and the Rouran Khaganate. So these, I think, are two particularly interesting ones. So we have covered, for example, Carthage and many of the periods of the ancient Egyptian empires, but this Kingdom of Aksum is the first one where we'll actually go really deep into Africa. So I think a particularly exciting one for me, and I hope it will be for you as well. And as for the Rouran Khaganate, it is one of the first Mongolian tribal Khaganates. They had khans. But we have covered, for example, the Xianbei or the Xiongnu, who were tribal confederations and nomadic empires. However, this is probably the most Mongolian, or traditionally thought Mongolian one. So we're starting moving west in terms of our nomadic empires, and in terms of our African empires, we're now moving south as well. So, but also it did touch into Arabia as well. But nonetheless, these are two very important empires, and there are two that I did not know too much about going into, so I hope you will endeavor to learn as much as I have been able to through this research. Furthermore, in the style of Plutarch's Parallel Lives, we will highlight a significant leader from each empire. In this episode, we will cover Kaleb from the Kingdom of Aksum and Anagui from the Rouran Khaganate. And in the end, we will have a comparison between Kaleb and Anagui, in the style of Plutarch's Parallel Lives, one of my favorite authors, who is the inspiration behind my Ancient Greek and Roman series, but pretty much all my series going forward as well. So we will have a comparison between Kaleb and Anagui to learn a little bit more about the two leaders and as well their respective empires. So without further ado, what the structure will be, we will cover the first empire, we will cover the first leader associated with that empire, then we will cover the second empire and the second leader associated with that empire, and then in the end we will have a comparison. So without further ado, we will begin. So the Kingdom of Aksum. The Kingdom of Aksum was located in the Horn of Africa, emerged as a prominent civilization in the ancient world, with a history that spans several centuries, as we shall see. Therefore, we'll seek to find a history of both of its rise and fall to perhaps learn more about it, and as well perhaps why empires rise and fall today in modern times. So the Kingdom of Aksum, also known as the Aksumite Empire, or the Ethiopian or Abyssinian Empire, was a kingdom in East Africa and South Arabia from classical antiquity until the Middle Ages. It is based in what is now northern Ethiopia and Eritrea, and those two modern countries in Africa, and spans to present-day Djibouti and Sudan. Sudan is now in North and South Sudan. And it extended at its height into much of southern Arabia during the reign of Kaleb, king of Aksum, as we shall see. So covering both Africa and the Middle East as well. So as for its rise, in around 100 AD, the exact date of Aksum's foundation is unclear, but it is likely began as a small trading community in the region that is now Ethiopia or Eritrea, or both, likely. It is believed to have developed from the fusion of indigenous cultures and the influences of South Arabia. So they would later go to conquer South Arabia, but they were even at the earliest times getting influenced by Southern Arabia, or Saudi Arabia as the modern country. As for trade and prosperity, from around 100 to 300 CE, Common Era, Aksum's strategic location along the Red Sea and the Indian Ocean trade routes facilitated its economic growth. The kingdom became a major player in international trade, given its location, dealing in goods such as ivory, gold, spices, and exotic animals. Many of these things that come particularly from the region in Africa they are from. And the adoption of the Ge'ez script, that's Geez, with an apostrophe in between the two E's, for writing and the minting of a distinctive coinage contributed to Aksum's cultural and economic identity. So one thing that has been pretty common as empires have developed throughout history is having their own coinage. Until they have their own coin, they're sort of more likely to be a subordinate state. As for Christianity, in the 4th century CE, or AD is the old way of calling it, now we call it CE, around the 4th century, Aksum became one of the first states in the world to officially adopt Christianity. This conversion is attributed to the king Azana, who declared Christianity as the state religion. The kingdom of Aksum developed strong ties with the Christian world, including the Byzantine Empire. We've covered the Byzantine Empire, also known as the Eastern Roman Empire. There's a great author, Graham Hancock, and he has a book, supposedly the Ark of the Covenant, which was searched for in Indiana Jones, the first episode, sort of a passion project of his. He wrote a book, and supposedly the Ark of the Covenant might even be in Ethiopia, which might have connection to the Aksum kingdom and furthermore Christianity that developed at this time. Furthermore, to the Golden Age, for expansion from the 4th to the 6th centuries CE, Aksum reached its zenith under King Kaleb, as we shall biograph soon, extending its territory into Southern Arabia and parts of Sudan, North and South Sudan. The kingdom's military might and maritime strength, as mentioned, allowed it to dominate trade routes and exert influence over neighboring regions. The stelae and architecture, or the stela also pronounced, Aksum is renowned for its towering obelisk, or stela, the most famous being the obelisk of Aksum, as we have an image on the slide we shall see soon. These structures served various purposes, including marking graves and symbolizing the power and grandeur of the kingdom. Aksum also developed impressive architectural feats, these are not included, such as the construction of large palace complexes and churches. But nonetheless, their fall, so around circa the 7th century CE, several factors contributed to the decline of Aksum. The rise of Islamic powers in the region altered the trade routes, diminishing Aksum's economic significance. Additionally, internal factors such as political instability and possible environmental changes such as deforestation and soil degradation may have contributed to the decline, so perhaps not sustainable practices they had. Whereas all the other empires, pretty much all the other empires that we've covered, not necessarily all of them, have had both internal and external factors, and this is definitely true for the kingdom of Aksum. But, however, their external factors were both the culmination of the Arabians changing their trade routes and losing their economic significance, but also perhaps environmental factors, which might have been their own cause. Furthermore, as for invasion and isolation, by the 7th century CE, Aksum faced external threats from Islamic forces. The Arab invasion led to the isolation of Aksum from the lucrative trade routes it had once dominated. The kingdom's decline continued, and by the 9th century CE, it also largely vanished from historical records. So, fewer writings at this point doesn't necessarily mean they were completely gone, but there was less documentation, which is likely a sign that there had been less going on at least. But nonetheless, as for their legacy, although the kingdom of Aksum fell, its legacy endured. The Aksumite civilization played a crucial role in the shaping of the cultural and religious landscape of the Horn of Africa. The Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church, which traces its origins from the Aksum's adoption of Christianity, continued to be a significant institution in the religion. The archaeological remains of Aksum, including stela and ancient structures, stand as a testament to the once mighty civilization. So very important empire, bringing Christianity to Africa, interacting with Arabia, controlling the trade routes, and it's really the first empire that we've really covered in the more southern part of Africa. As we mentioned, we've covered the Egyptian and Carthaginian empires, but this is for first that's sort of really deeper into Africa, and also very significant in bringing Christianity to Africa and their empire, respectively. So as for the life of Kaleb, so Kaleb is a name that's similar to mine. It actually has is a name derived from the biblical character Kaleb. Kaleb and Joshua were sent off to go on a mission, and they did not betray their state, the state of Israel, and Joshua eventually becomes king, nothing because Kaleb was any lesser. It just ended up that Joshua ended up being king. But nonetheless, in this case, this Caleb did become king. So Caleb, also known as Saint El-Lesban, was king of Aksum, which was situated in modern-day Eritrea and Ethiopia, as mentioned. It is a name derived from biblical character Caleb, and it was a given name. On both his coins and inscriptions, he left in Aksum, as well as Ethiopian hieroglyphical sources and king lists, he refers to himself as the son of Tazina. Procopius, who was a Greek scholar who became the principal Roman historian in the 6th century, calls him Helestheus, which is a variant of the Koine Greek Elesvas, I believe my pronunciation, version of the regal name of Gies as well. So perhaps these were some other names that he might have, but you must note that these all have sort of a Greek spin on it. Maybe it's a bias because the scholar was Greek, or maybe it was a testament to the Greek connection of the kingdom of Aksum, which might have been linked originally perhaps from the Ptolemaic kingdom, which were descendants of the Alexandrian or the Macedonian Empire, which brought Greek pretty much across the world. So his name, or Caleb, or also Elam Atabiha, his reign was from the late 6th century CE, approximately 518 to 550 CE, though the dates are approximate, of course. So his ascension to the throne. The circumstances of Caleb's ascension to the throne are not well documented, unfortunately. It is believed that he may have come from noble or royal lineage, and his ascension likely followed the death or abdication of his predecessor. So naturally king after another king, most likely. There's no evidence to the contrary. As for his military campaigns, Caleb is renowned for his military prowess and successful campaigns, expanding the Aksumite kingdom's influence into Arabia, reaching its pinnacle in terms of geographical extent. He intervened in the affairs of the Himyarite kingdom, which is in present-day Yemen, to support Christian communities facing persecution, so pro-Christianity even outside his own borders. Caleb's forces were instrumental in defeating the Jewish ruler Du-Nuas, who targeted Christians in the region as well, so defending Christians outside of his own country and within his own country. As for his rule in Himyar, after the military intervention, Caleb established direct rule in Himyar, appointing an Aksumite governor to oversee the region. This marked a significant extension of Aksum's territorial control and showcased Caleb's ability to project power beyond the kingdom's traditional border, so expanding the kingdom on many fronts he did. As for more detail in terms of his religious affiliations, Caleb's reign coincided with a period of religious transformation in the Aksumite kingdom. While Aksum had officially adopted Christianity during the reign of King Ezana in the 4th century CE, many years before, Caleb reinforced the Christian identity of the kingdom through his military campaigns in support of Christian communities abroad as well. In the Himyar, for example, he is considered a champion of Christianity, and his actions further solidified the ties between Aksum and the Christian world. So as mentioned, the Aksum Empire had been communicating with the Byzantine Empire, which was Christian, and it was also known as the Eastern Roman Empire. Furthermore, for relations with the Byzantium, Caleb maintained diplomatic relations with the Byzantine Empire, particularly with Emperor Justinian I, famous for producing Corpus Juris Civilis, which is the Code of Justinian, one of the earlier civil codes, but as we covered in many of the empires, certainly not the first. The Christian faith, but is likely the most famous. That's why Roman law is often considered the oldest form of study of law. They don't really look much further. For example, the Code of Hammurabi. The Christian faith further served as a unifying factor in these diplomatic ties, so it was easy to have diplomacy with the Byzantium when they were both Christian. And the connection with Byzantium likely contributed to Aksum's status as an important Christian kingdom in the region. As for his death, however, in succession, the exact circumstances of Caleb's death are unclear. According to some accounts, he abdicated the throne and entered a monastery in response to a personal tragedy. His son, Geber Meskel, succeeded him as ruler of Aksum, so hereditary monarchy here. But it's interesting to wonder what this personal tragedy was that caused him to enter into a monastery, sort of a humble way to go. Diocletian is one of the Roman empires that sort of one of the last good empires of the Roman Empire. He was the leading Augustus or Augusti, and he actually retired into a region in Dalmatia, which is quite humble of him, and he actually didn't come back, whereas others such as Maximian did. So it's really, I think, quite profound for someone to go into retirement and really mean it, and it's, I think, quite humble, and it seems to be something that Kaleb did, but maybe it was through force, and maybe it was something entirely different. Maybe he did die, maybe it was a cover-up, but those are all speculations. The history as we know it, and most accurately can produce, is that he did go into a monastery from some personal tragedy. So that is the life of Kaleb, and furthermore, while the details of Kaleb's life are as for his legacy, King Kaleb is remembered for his military achievements, especially in Himyar, protecting Christians, and for his efforts to support the spread of Christianity as well, more broadly. His reign is considered a pivotal period in Aksumite history, contributing to the kingdom's political, military, and religious prominence in the region, and expanding to its largest geographic extent, particularly, notably, claiming some of the southern Arabia. While the details of Kaleb's life are sometimes shrouded in historical ambiguity, his contributions to Aksum's expansion and consolidation of Christianity within the kingdom left an enduring mark on the history of the Horn of Africa. So that is the kingdom of Aksum and Kaleb. And now, if you are able to see, we will now discuss the content of the slide. And if not, I hope you can follow along through listening. So in the top left part of the title, we have the kingdom of Aksum and Kaleb. It was also known as the Aksumite, Ethiopian, or Abyssinian Empire. It was based in northern Ethiopia and Eritrea, spanning to Djibouti and Sudan, that's North and South Sudan, and into much of southern Arabia at its height under Kaleb. Significant leader, once again, is Kaleb Empire, Aksum, period 150 BCE to 960 CE. Modern locations: Ethiopia, Eritrea, Djibouti, North Sudan, South Sudan, and Saudi Arabia. Perhaps even some of Yemen as well. Million square kilometers was 2.50, very large. A million square miles is 0.97% of the world, 1.86%. So one of the larger empires that we've covered so far. However, it must be noted that this area maybe have been relatively less contested than some other regions. For example, claiming 2.5 million square kilometers in maybe in the Warring States period of China might have been unfeasible, or in Europe, but nonetheless there was many warring states in this region. But the Kingdom of Aksum was the first empire in this region, formally called. And that also percent of the world, 1.86%, however still a very contested area of land that excludes Antarctica. The capital city was named Aksum, but it later became Kubar or Jarma after circa 800 CE. Government was a monarchy, as we saw in the life of Kaleb, and common languages were Ge'ez, Sabaic, and Greek, which became from circa 100 CE onwards, and various other languages. Religion was Christianity and Nicene and Miaphysite, which was the official religion after 350 CE. And there was also Aksumite polytheism before 350 CE. So it's not that Christianity came out of no religion. Christianity actually came to replace an existing polytheism. And the population was likely in several millions. So not a huge population given countries today, but given the capacities and given their agricultural capacities, that is likely what the population was, which was still quite large. As in the top left, we have an image of King Kaleb. To the right of that, we have some coins, Aksumite currency depicting King Endubis. To the right of that, in the top right, next to the map, we have the Aksumite obelisk in Abyssinia, and it's a painting or a drawing from the 18th century CE. But as we can see, this is sort of the structures that they created, these obelisks, which were, or satras, I believe they're called, and they would build just straight vertical, often for religious reasons. Let's see if I can get that word correct. There was I believe satra. And so below that we have the 14th century Islamic portrayal of the first Hijjah, which was the Aksumite decline of the Qurayshi request to give up Muslim refugees. So here they have got the Aksumite king or some official rejecting to give Muslim refugees back. Interesting that the depiction is they're not necessarily doing a good thing, but they're not necessarily depicted in a poor light in the painting or the artwork. Below that we have the Gia script on the left of the Jarmina Gospels, it's a Christian work, and to the right we have an illuminated manuscript of the Holy Mother Mary, both of these produced by the Kingdom of Aksum, showing their Christian links. Below that and to the left we have the table of hieroglyphs found at Aksum in the 9th century CE. It's of course a drawing of it. To the right we have Saint King Elazban, who is subjugating the Himyarites. So here more of a negative light, he is stabbing someone, but it looks he's got a halo, so evidently vindicated for that which he is doing. And to the right of that we have some summary of its timeline. So it was in classical antiquity to the early Middle Ages. It was established in around 150 BCE. The early southern Arabian involvement was in the 3rd century CE. The conquest of Kush was in 330 CE. Azana's conversion to Christianity, marking the start of Christianity in the Kingdom of Aksum, was in 325 to 328 CE. The conquest of the Himyarite kingdom in 520 CE by King Kaleb, and the year of the elephant in 570 CE. The early Muslim conquest in the 7th century CE, and the collapse in circa 960 CE. I might be getting this wrong. I yet to actually confirm it, but I believe that according to Graham Hancock, it was some Elephantines, the people were called, who might have been hiding the Ark of the Covenant. And in the top right, we have a map of the Kingdom of Aksum at its peak, where we can see it extends into quite significantly into South Arabia, and having control of much sea access in the Indian Ocean, therefore significant trade routes. And as we can see, you can travel up here all the way up. Egypt would be up here, and Byzantium would be up here, as you can see my mouse. So that is the Kingdom of Aksum and Kaleb, and we will discuss the leader a bit more in the comparison with the next leader to follow. So the Rouran Khaganate. So the Rouran Khaganate, also known as the Wan or Juan, Juan, or Niruran, were a nomadic confederation that played a significant role in the history of Central Asia during late antiquity. Therefore, like the previous empires, we will seek to find the rise and fall of this empire to perhaps learn how empires today might rise and fall. My apologies in advance for any mispronunciations I might make. I'm trying my best, but also trying to be phonetical too. If someone's trying to write something down, it's hard. If I were to pronounce everything right, they might not be able to write it down. So sometimes I'll read words out as well, but I apologize in advance. I'm trying my best. So the Rouran Khaganate, also known as Rouran Khaganate, was a tribal confederation and later a state founded by the people of Proto-Mongolic Donghu origin. The Rouran supreme rulers used the title of Khagan. That's why it's called a Khaganate, a popular title borrowed from the Xianbei. We've covered the Xianbei Confederation. That's Xianbei. The Rouran Khaganate lasted from the late 4th century until the mid-6th century, when they were defeated by the Gokturk rebellion at the peak of their power. So unfortunately the Rouran Khaganate actually declined at their peak, which subsequently led to the rise of the Turks in world history. So they were defeated by the Gokturk, who were the former, later became the Turks more broadly. The Khaganate overthrown, some Rouran remnants possibly became Tartars, and so these Khaganate people might have became Tartars themselves, while others possibly migrated west to become Pannonian Avars, known by such names as the Vachonites or Pseudo-Avars, who settled in Pannonia, which is centered in modern-day Hungary, so their descendants might be in Hungary as well, during the 6th century CE. These Avars were pursued into the Byzantine Empire, so they could have also spread into the Eastern Roman Empire by the Gokturks, who referred to the Avars as a slave and vassal people, and requested that the Byzantines expel them. While this Rouran-Avars link remains controversial theory, a recent DNA study has confirmed the genetic origins of the Avar elite as originating from the Mongolian plains. So after the fall of the Rouran Khaganate, they got quite dispersed, and some of them became the Avars. At least the elites did, and maybe the non-elites were more mixed in terms of blood, or DNA, more broadly speaking. Other theories instead link the origins of the Pannonian Avars to peoples such as the Uar. So the Rouran Khaganate were considered an imperial confederation, so therefore we can call them an empire. And the Rouran Khaganate was based on the distinct exploitation of agrarian society. So they were nomadic, but they would exploit agrarian societies below them. Although according to Nikolai Kradin, the Rouran had a feudal system themselves, or nomadic feudalism. The Rouran controlled trade routes and raided and subjugated oases and outposts such as Gao Chang, which we have an image of, as we shall see. They are said to have shown the signs of both the early state and a chiefdom. The Rouran have been credited as a band of steppe robbers as well, because of they adopted the strategy of raids and extortion on northern China. It must be noted the Great Wall of China was not built to it wasn't built to expand, it was built to hold out the barbarians. And the Rouran Khaganate, although quite a few years later, would be a manifestation of these nomadic barbarians. During the time the Great Wall was being built, it was largely the Xiongnu and the Xiongbai that they were trying to keep out, but there were many other tribal peoples, maybe even predecessors to the Rouran Khaganate. The Khaganate was an aggressively militarized society as well. The military hierarchical polity established to solve the exclusive foreign policy problems of requisitioning surplus products from neighboring nations and states. So aggressive military, and they would really feed their military by raid and conquer. So very militaristic peoples. So it must be, side note, Mogulu was perhaps the first tribal chief, and perhaps the name Mongol itself comes from his name. So that's an important distinction. I originally thought about doing the biography of Mogulu himself, but firstly, he was a tribal chief and not necessarily a Khaganate or a Khan. He was, and also there's less information we have about his life, and he's semi-mythical. So, but Mogulu, it's important to note that the first Rouran Khaganate, or the first tribal chief of the Rouran, perhaps was the first formerly called Mongol. Something that I'm observing in the decline and fall of the Roman Empire is how important naming is. For example, Augustus sort of made his name, but following that, people would endeavor to be called Augustus by claiming the imperial purple. Caesar was a name that was very frequently reused. Alexander to this day is still, I know many people named after Alexander. I think it's one thing to, not saying one is better, one is worse. It's an honor to be able to fill in the name of a great person, but it is also equally an honor to make a name for oneself. So Mogulu was perhaps not only created a name for himself, but a whole people's, the Mongols. So, nonetheless, we'll start with the formation in the 4th century CE, specifically circa 330 CE. So the Rouran Khaganate emerged in the 4th century CE in the steppes of Central Asia, likely in the region of modern-day Mongolia, hence the name. The Rouran people were a nomadic Turkic-speaking group that formed a confederation under a single Khagan, or now we call it Khan. As for leadership and expansion, the Rouran Khaganate was led by a series of Khagans, or Khans, and its leadership played a crucial role in consolidating the various nomadic tribes into a powerful confederation. The Rouran expanded their influence westward and engaged in neighboring nomadic groups, including the Xianbei. That's Xianbei. So this must be noted, this is long before the Mongol invasions. For example, there's a great book called by Khan Eagledon called Wolf of the Plains that really biographs the later rise of Khans. For example, Genghis Khan is probably the most famous Khan, but it came many years after the Khans of the Rouran Khaganate. So this must be noted many years before Genghis Khan, who is considered quite an old figure, but relatively like compared to even Alexander the Great or the Rouran Khaganates. It's actually quite relatively more modern, but nonetheless the name Khan comes from the Rouran Khaganate as well. There might have been Khans of other tribes as well, not necessarily just the Rouran, but the Rouran Khaganate is the first real imperial Khan dynasty or empire that we have covered and will cover. So I think it's important here. So many names coming from this Rouran Khaganate. We can say Khan might formally come from this. Maybe it started before, but still we can trace its root here. This is where I would identify it. And even the name Mongol more broadly from Mugulu. So as for the relations with the Northern Wei dynasty, the Rouran maintained a complex relations with the Northern Wei dynasty in northern China. While there was periods of conflict, there were also instances of diplomatic alliances and marriages between the ruling elites of the Rouran and Northern Wei. As we covered in the 16 Kingdoms period of ancient China, there was a lot of mixed breeding between Xianbei and the Han people and other barbarians, as the Chinese called them, and the Han. So there was a lot of marriages, intermarriage between the Rouran Khaganate and the Northern Wei, as we can see here, but also many wars, hence the reason why the Great Wall of China was originally built. As for the Golden Age, Khagan Yujuli Mogul, who reigned from circa 460 to 493 CE under the leadership of Khagan Yujulu Mogul, the Rouran Khaganate reached its zenith. The Khaganate became a formidable power in Central Asia, exerting influence over vast territories and nomadic groups. Mogul, the name, maybe he's likely directly related from Mogulu himself. As for the conflict with Gauche, that's Gaoche, Gauche perhaps, the Rouran engaged in conflicts with the Gauche nomads in the 5th century CE. These clashes weakened the Rouran and contributed to internal strife within the Confederation. So external threat caused them to weaken internally as well. So as for the fall, the causes of the fall, starting with internal conflicts, as alluded to, the Rouran Khaganate faced internal divisions and power struggles, particularly between different branches of the ruling Yujulu clan. These internal conflicts weakened the Khaganate and made it vulnerable to external threats. So as mentioned, the external and internal, both usually common in the decline of an empire, sort of feed into each other. If the internal structure is weak, external forces will capitalize it. And if external forces are attacking or capitalizing on one, their internal structure will weaken as well. As for the rise of the Göktürks, the Göktürks, another nomadic Turkic group, emerged as a powerful force in the steppes during the 6th century CE. They led by the charismatic ruler Bumin Khagan, so also a Khan. The Göktürks successfully challenged the Rouran for supremacy in the region. As for the defeat by the Göktürks, in 552 CE, the decisive battle between the Rouran and Göktürks took place in 552 CE. The Göktürks, under the leadership of Bumin Khagan and his successor Isik Khagan, defeated the Rouran forces. This event marked the end of the Rouran Khaganate. And the aftermath, following the defeat, remnants of the Rouran population sought refuge in various regions. Some joined the Gauche, who they formerly had been attacking, while others migrated westward, contributing to the complex migrations and interactions among Central Asian nomadic groups during the period. So a lot of their lineage has been diversified. As for their legacy, the Rouran Khaganate's fall and lasting impact on the geopolitical landscape of Central Asia is vast. The rise of the Göktürks and the dissolution of the Rouran contributed to the subsequent Turkic migration and the formation of new nomadic confederation in the region. The Göktürks, in particular, went on to establish their own personal Khaganate, shaping the course of Central Asian history in the centuries to come. But maybe they never would have been such if there wasn't a formidable foe to earlier contest with. So that is the Rouran Khaganate, and now we will discuss Anagui, a specific ruler, to learn even more about the empire. So the Rouran Khaganate, being a confederation of nomadic tribes, did not have many of their leaders are not specifically well documented, being nomadic, and Therefore, there's not necessarily a universal leader regarded as the most important. As we've mentioned, Mogul was quite important as well. Mogulu was the first, but both of them are little documented. But Anagui happens to be the last and also third to last, and he is better documented, and since he covered a very important period in the Rouran Khaganate history, we will endeavor to cover him here. However, Anagui, also known as Anjie, A-N-J-A-J-I-E, I think that's actually An-Cie, if it would be in Chinese, or Mandarin pronunciation, who ruled in a critical period, stands out for his role in shaping the fate of the Rouran Khaganate. Therefore, we seek to cover a biography of his life. So his name, Anagui, also known as An-Cie. His reign was in the late 5th century CE, circa 490 to 516 CE, and his reign was likely from 520 to 521 CE, so just based on simple math, perhaps he came into power when he was 30 years old. So for anyone younger than 30, like myself, there's still time if one wants to become a Khan. And from 522 to 552 was his second reign, so he reigned twice, with an intermediary period, as we shall see. His cousin, Yujulu Puluomen, took control for a period, but he eventually lost a fight, or Anagui lost a fight for a bit and fled, but eventually they divided the territory to establish stability, so he came back to power. So as for his ascension and leadership, Anagui began to belong to the ruling Yujulu clan of the Rouran, so hereditary monarchy. But despite there were still family struggles, he still was in the royal lineage, perhaps dating all the way back to Mogulu himself. Perhaps even we could call it the first Mongol. And he belonged to the ruling clan of the Rouran and ascended to the leadership of the Khaganate, succeeding his father, Yujulu Shellan, so his father was a ruler as well, or Shellan. But actually, I believe his father was more likely Yujulu Chonu. Yujulu Shellan perhaps was one of the first official Khans. His ascension to power marked a period of both internal consolidation and external challenges for the Rouran Khaganate. As for the conflict with the Northern Wei dynasty, during Anagui's rule, the Rouran faced challenges in their relations with the Northern Wei dynasty, a major sedentary power in northern China. So this was a sedentary power, contrast their nomadic power. The Rouran Northern Wei interactions involved both military conflicts and diplomatic relations. In different periods, there were also marriages between the two. As for the conflicts with the Gaoshe, the Anagui encountered difficulties in dealing with Gaoshe nomads in the west of Rouran territories. This period saw significant military engagements, contributing to the weakening of the Rouran Khaganate. As for internal struggles as well, Anagui's reign was characterized by internal strife within the Rouran leadership. This internal discord weakened the unity of the Khaganate, making it susceptible to external pressures and contributing to the ultimate downfall. As for his relationship with Toba Wei, Anagui maintained diplomatic ties with Toba Wei, a branch of Northern Wei that had migrated to the northern Mongolian plateau, or the Mongolian, not Northern Mongolian, just Mongolian plateau, pardon me. These connections were complex, involving both alliances and conflicts, as the Rouran sought to navigate their relationship with various sedentary and nomadic neighbors. So they sort of brought in someone from Northern Wei and sort of learned from him, sort of embraced him as their own to sort of enhance the relationship with Northern Wei, but also other sedentary peoples, but also more broadly other confederations as well, or nomadic confederations as well. But as for his downfall, starting with the rise of rival leaders, Anagui faced challenges from rival factions within the Rouran leadership. The struggle for power and influence among different branches of the ruling Yujulu clan exacerbated internal divisions. Hence, for example, his cousin Yujulu Poluomen even took the throne for a bit. Furthermore, to the Gokturk challenge, the rise of the Gokturks, led by Bumin Khagan, presented a formidable external threat to the Rouran Khaganate. Bumin Khagan sought to unite various Turkic tribes against the Rourans, and military successes further weakened Anagui's hold to power. As for his defeat and death, in 516 CE, Anagui faced a significant defeat at the hands of the Turks, who would eventually, and he was this marked the end of the Rouran Khaganate. This defeat marked the end of the Rouran Khaganate's dominance in Central Asia, and Anagui died during or after the battle, and the remnants of the Rouran fled in different directions. So he was the last leader. Despite many successes within his own lifetime, coming back to power, he still, unfortunately, was the one to witness the fall of the Rouran Khaganate. So sometime between February 11th and March 10th, 552, Anagui was defeated by Tumen Bumen in the north Hue Huang, which is in present-day Hebei, and supposedly he even maybe committed suicide then or later, or was defeated in battle. Following the defeat, Anagui's son An Luo Chen fled to northern Qi, that's Qi, while his uncle Yujulu Deng Shuzi succeeded him under the protection of the Western Wei. Another relative, Yujulu Tiefa, declared himself Khagan in the east of Gobi. So there were still, did have a legacy, but the Rouran Khaganate was, after him, much divided. As for his legacy, Anagui's reign and the subsequent downfall of the Rouran Khaganate has a profound impact on the history of Central Asia. The fragmentation of the Rouran contributed to the complex dynamics of the nomadic migrations and power shifts in the region, paving the way for the ascendancy of the Gok Turks and the emergence of a new political entities in the steppes. So that is the Rouran Khaganate, and Anagui will now discuss the content of the slide, if you're able to see, and if not, I hope you can follow along through listening. So title, we have Rouran Khaganate and Anagui. It was a tribal confederation and later state founded by a people of Proto-Mongolic Dongu origin. It was from the 4th century until the middle 6th century, and it was defeated by the Gok Turk rebellion at their peak, so it declined at their peak, whereas many other sort of fizzled off much before they declined at their peak, which is an interesting difference about this empire. Significant leader, Yujulu Anagui. So empire, Rouran Khaganate, period 330 to 555 CE. Modern locations, Mongolia, China, Russia, Turkey. Million square kilometers, 2.80. Million square miles, 1.08%. Of the world, 2.08%. So very, very large, but they were nomadic, so it's easier to hold a larger piece of land when one's riding around on horses and nomadic, but nonetheless, still very large area. And that's 2.808% of the world, excluding Antarctica, and it was relatively contested areas too. Many nomadic peoples, but there were also many sort of agrarian peoples that they could easily sort of trample over, likely for poor reasons, but maybe for good reasons in other cases, but nonetheless, whereas it's important to note how contested a region of land. So one empire might have 3% of the world, but it was in an inhospitable land, whereas another might have a fraction of a percent, but in a very contested area. For example, as we saw with Sparta and Athens, for example, they both were less than 0.01% of the world, but still they're very contested areas in ancient Greece. The capital was Ting. The government was a Khaganate led by a Khan. Common languages were Mongoli, both Rouran and Mongolian versions, Old Turkic, and Middle Chinese, which was used for diplomacy, particularly with the Northern Wei. Their religions were Tengrism, Shamanism, and Buddhism as well. And the population was likely in the several millions as well, as much as they could sustain as a nomadic people, and through sort of conquering nomadic people or agricultural peoples or agrarian peoples to feed them. And the top left, we have some information about Yujulu Anagui, because I was not able to find an image of him. So he was a Khagan of Rouran from 520 to 521 CE. His predecessor was Yujulu Chanu, and his successor was Yujulu Poluomen. And then he reigned again from 522 to 552 CE, a year gap between, and his predecessor, so his cousin, Yujulu Poluomen, he managed to reclaim the throne, and his successors were Yujulu Tiefa in the east and Yujulu Deng Shuji in the west. Yujulu Tiefa in the east, if I said west correctly. So nonetheless, he was sort of the last Khan, because after that it divided into east and west, as we can see here. Other images we have on the left a portrait of a Rouran ambassador by Emperor Yuan of Liang in 526 to 539 CE, and the portraits of periodical offerings in the 10th century. This is a 10th century copy of the drawing. To the right of that we have another ambassador of Rouran in the Gathering of Kings circa 650 CE. And below that we have Gao Chang, subjugated to Rouran in 460 CE, so a region where they fought a significant battle there. So some ruins. Up and to the right we have an epitaph of Yujulu Farron, who died in 29th of November 586 CE. To the right of that we have a list of the tribal chiefs. I will go for and list them all. They're all on the next 8 names I will all list are the 4th century CE they ruled. Magulu, and following Magulu, all of them are Yujulu. So we have Chelohui, Tanagui, Bati, Disuyuan, Pihuba, Weiheti, and Heduohan. And as for the Khans, we have, these are all from the Yujulu clan: Shelon, Hulu, Boluzen, Datan, Wuti, Tehejen, Yucheng, Doulon, Nagai, Futu, Chonu, Anagui, Poluomen, and Anagui again. And in the top right we have a map showing the massive geographical extent of the Rouran Khaganate, as we can see here up here with the Gaoju Turks, who would eventually defeat them, the Northern Wei, who they contested with many times, but also intermarry for times. Over here we have the Byzantium Empire. We've also can highlight the Aksum Empire, whom we covered in the earlier part of this episode. So very exciting here with the Sasanian Empire, the Gupta Empire, Southern Qi. Very, very valuable map we can see here, and the Magyars are here, who will later become the Hungarians. And you can even see the Finnish were even here at the time. So, and that's in 500 CE. So that is the Rouran Khaganate and Anagui. And now we will have a comparison between Kaleb and Anagui. So while Kaleb of the Kingdom of Aksum and Yujulu Anagui of the Rouran Khaganate were significant historical figures who lived during roughly the same period in the 6th century CE, they ruled over very different societies and regions. Therefore, we seek to find a comparison between the two to learn a little bit more about them, because I think just learning about something individually, you don't learn about how they're different. And I think how people are different is really their defining features. There's the Anna Karenina principle, it's a great book, Anna Karenina, that I read later, but I first learned it from Peter Thiel, is that all functional families are alike and all dysfunctional families are different for different reasons. So I think all exemplary people are different for different reasons. So, nonetheless, and they ruled over but they ruled in the same period, so we can learn a lot about them and how just by different geographies and different empires they differed so much. So as for the geographical context, Kaleb from the Kingdom of Aksum. Aksum was a kingdom located in the Horn of Africa, primarily in the region that is now Ethiopia and Eritrea. Whereas Yujulu Anagui was in the Rouran Khaganate, and the Rouran Khaganate was a nomadic confederation situated in the steppes of Central Asia, covering parts of modern-day Mongolia, China, and beyond. As for their political and social structures, as for Kaleb, the Aksum was a settled kingdom that differs from the nomadic kingdom of the Khaganate, Rouran Khaganate, with established urban centers, trade routes, and complex political structure. Kaleb's reign marked a period of expansion and adoption of Christianity as the state religion. Christianity already was the state religion, but he expanded upon it, as his predecessor had converted to Christianity. And maybe he more formalized it as the state religion as well. As for Yujulu Anagui, the Rouran Khaganate was a nomadic confederation, quite different, but eventually became an imperial state as well, but a nomadic empire. And furthermore, it was characterized by mobile lifestyles and a decentralized political structure, so quite different structures. And leadership was often based on the strength and influence of individual khans. So whoever's the toughest would often come to lead, but the Yujulu pretty much ruled non-stop. As for their religious context, Kaleb is known for his role in solidifying Christianity as the state religion of Aksum. His reign saw the spread and establishment of Christianity in the region, and maybe we could even say much of the Christianity that is still in Africa today might have traced its sources back to the kingdom of Aksum. Whereas Ujulu Anagui, while the Rouran Khaganate was not associated with particular religious transformation, it had interactions with various neighboring cultures and religions, including Buddhism and the religions of sedentary societies. So they adopted other religions, but never quite as religious as Kaleb or the Aksum, many of the kings of Aksum as well. As for their military engagements, Kaleb engaged in military campaigns to expand Aksum's influence in the Arabian Peninsula and the region surrounding the Red Sea. He was largely successful, reaching the zenith of the geographical extent of the Kingdom of Aksum. His interventions in the Arabian Peninsula were notable, including conflicts with the Jewish ruler Du Nuaz, where he protects Christianity from even in neighboring regions. Whereas Ujulu Anagui faced both internal and external military challenges during his reign, so he was sort of on the back foot, on the defensive largely. And the Rouran Khaganate had conflicts with neighboring nomadic groups and sedentary states, including the Northern Wei dynasty in China, which was quite a formidable foe. So maybe Kaleb was more broadly a little bit more successful in his military exploits, but maybe Anagui had a lucky deck of hand of cards, I was going to say, and therefore maybe even if they were to switch places, maybe Kaleb wouldn't have been successful in Anagui's position, and maybe Kaleb's position might have been easy for Anagui, but that's speculation. We can only say that Kaleb was successful and Anagui was maybe lesser so successful militarily. As for their respective legacies, Kaleb is remembered for his contributions to the spread of Christianity in the Horn of Africa. The Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church traces its origins to this period. As for Ujulu Anagui, Anagui's legacy is in the context of the Rouran Khagate's history, which contributed to the complex interactions among Central Asian nomadic groups and the subsequent rise of the Gok Turks, who ultimately defeated him, so sort of marking the end. So Kaleb marked the pinnacle, and Anagui marked sort of the end. But it also might be noted that the Rouran Khaganate declined at its pinnacle as well. And it also must be noted that any pinnacle necessarily has to be followed by decline. So maybe Kaleb could have done, if he had been more successful in his estate planning or his state planning, maybe he wouldn't have been the zenith, because maybe if he did a better job, he would not have been the zenith, because his descendant might have done better than him, which would have been something good he could have done. By being the zenith, his descendants necessarily were less successful. But the same is also true for Anagui, because he was like the last before the big division of the Rouran Khaganate. So both of them sort of mark the period of their decline, but also they both mark their zeniths as well. Likely there might have been one could argue that under Mogul, Ujulu Mogul, the zenith was the zenith of the Rouran Khaganate, but Anagui was still at one of its peaks. Furthermore, thus Kaleb and Ujulu Anagui were leaders of distinct societies with distinct social structures, geographical locations, and historical contexts, albeit at the same period. Their reigns, while both significant, left distinct legacies on the regions they governed. So very different leaders despite being in the same period. One more sedentary society, one more nomadic, and both the size of their empires were quite similar as well. So that is the Kingdom of Aksum and Kaleb and the Rouran Khaganate and Anagui, and this is an episode of Ages of Empires. My name is Kalen Ashcroft. This is Cashcroft TV. I'm very grateful for your support, and I'd be very grateful if you continue to provide it. Thank you so much.